If you've ever used an AI, you've written a prompt. But you've probably noticed there's a huge difference between just asking a simple question and really skillfully guiding an AI to give you the exact result you need. That skill? That's called prompt engineering. And today, we're going to break down exactly how you can start to master it. So, let's get into it.
And I want to start with this because it's absolutely the key takeaway. This isn't some secret art form that's only for a handful of technical experts. No, it's a skill that anyone can learn. And honestly, the better you get at it, the more powerful these AI tools are going to become for you.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with what prompt engineering actually is. Then we'll look at how you can configure a model's output. We'll explore the core techniques, see how to guide an AI through complex reasoning, and wrap things up with some essential best practices to set you up for success.
All right, let's start with the fundamentals. What are we really talking about when we say prompt engineering?
Well, at its core, it is the craft of giving the right instructions. You have to think of a large language model as a super advanced prediction engine. Your prompt is what sets it up to predict the right sequence of words. A really well-engineered prompt just dramatically improves the accuracy and the relevance of that prediction. And this is so crucial to understand. It is not about getting it perfect on the first try. Nobody does. Effective prompt engineering is all about a cycle of experimentation. You'll tweak your words, you'll adjust the structure, you'll play with the settings, and you keep doing that until you find that optimal combination for whatever your goal is. Now, let's build on that idea. A prompt is actually more than just the words you type. You also have essentially a control panel of settings that can directly influence how the AI behaves. Okay, so the single most important setting you need to understand is called temperature. The best way to think of it is as a creativity dial. It literally controls the level of randomness in the AI's word choices. And right alongside temperature, you have top K and top P. These are just some additional sampling controls. They work by narrowing down the AI's word choices to only the most probable options, which gives you another layer of fine-tuned control over how diverse the output is. So here's the crucial point. If you need a factual, focused, predictable answer, let's say you're summarizing a document, you'd use a low temperature. But if you're looking for creative ideas or diverse options, maybe for a brainstorming session, you'd crank that temperature dial way up. Now that we've covered the settings, let's get into the actual techniques for crafting the prompt itself. These are really the fundamental building blocks of good prompt engineering. The most basic technique is something called zero-shot prompting. And this is simply giving the model a direct instruction, but with zero examples. You just ask a question and you get an answer. It's the starting point for pretty much any interaction. But for more complex tasks, we're definitely going to want to build on this. So, to get much better results, you need to provide examples. A one-shot prompt gives the model one single example to imitate. But a few-shot prompt, where you provide multiple examples, that's where you really start to see the power. By showing the model a clear pattern, you're teaching it exactly what you're looking for. And here's a perfect example of how this works in practice. In this case, we're giving the model two examples of a pizza order that's been parsed into a very specific JSON format. By seeing this pattern, the model learns how to handle a brand new, more complex order and deliver the output in the precise structure we need. And you can build on that by adding other layers. For instance, system prompting sets the model's overall purpose. You can use role prompting to assign it a persona, like telling it to act as an expert travel guide. And contextual prompting is where you provide specific background info to help guide the response even further. So, we've seen how to get structured data out of an LLM. But what about tasks that require more complex problem solving? This is where we get into prompting for reasoning, guiding the model to actually think through a problem. Okay, let's look at a classic logic problem. A lot of LLMs get this wrong because it requires multiple steps of reasoning. They have a tendency to jump to a quick, intuitive answer that just happens to be incorrect. And there it is, that common mistake. The model just performs a simple multiplication without understanding the underlying logic, that the age difference between two people is constant over time. This is a perfect example of the limits of simple prompting for reasoning tasks. So the solution is a technique called chain of thought prompting. And it's deceptively simple. You just tell the model to think step by step. That simple instruction forces it to break the problem down and externalize its reasoning process before it spits out a final answer. And this just brilliantly illustrates the result. By following that chain of thought, the model correctly calculates the initial ages, establishes the constant age difference of 6 years, and then applies it to the current age to find the correct answer. 26. It's a game changer.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, so let's bring it all together in this last section on best practices. These are things you can start applying right away to improve your prompts.
Here's your checklist. Be specific about your goal. Keep your language clear and simple. Always try to provide examples. Few-shot prompting is one of the most powerful techniques there is. Don't be afraid to experiment. And this is a big one. Tell the model what to do, rather than just what not to do.
This slide shows that last point perfectly. Giving positive instructions, like only discuss these 4 things, is so much more effective than giving negative constraints, like do not list video game names. It's just clearer, and it gives the model a direct path to follow.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the most important best practice. Because this is an iterative process of experimentation, you have to document your work. Keeping track of your attempts is what turns simple tinkering into a real engineering discipline.
You know, using a simple template just like this one lets you track what works, what doesn't, and why. It helps you learn from your mistakes, replicate your successes, and really debug your failures. It transforms prompt engineering from just a series of one-off attempts into a systematic, improvable skill. So the real question isn't just, what's the perfect prompt, but rather, what's your process for finding it?